I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk. Joining me today is David Atkin. He is CEO at Principles for Responsible Investment. David, it is a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Judy. It's terrific to be here.
Wonderful. So now, David, tell me, how can or should investors be contributing to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development?
So the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is a program of work that's been outlined by governments around the world. It's identified what the key targets are to create a sustainable economy, a sustainable world for us to live in. And so it's really important that investors play their part in enabling that roadmap to be realised, because if we don't have a world where we're creating value, we're not creating a world where our children are going to live and thrive in. So it's a really fundamental question for us as investors to see what role we can play in enabling that environment. Now, what I should say is that we're not on the road that we should be. Only 15% of the SDGs have been achieved. In fact, perhaps even going backwards in the last couple of years because of COVID. So we need to accelerate. What is pleasing is that the General Assembly here in the UN is doing a review process at the moment, and we're looking forward to seeing how those SDGs are evolved next year. In particular, they were never designed to be investable by investors. So we think that with more communication from ourselves about the way they should be designed so that investors can get capital to work on those sustainable development goals, then we're more likely to achieve the targets that have been set.
Okay. Now tell me, what's the role of initiatives like the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance?
So the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is a very good example of where asset owners, in this case, have identified that climate change is a systemic risk and is something that they cannot solve on their own. And so by collaborating with like-minded investors, in this case asset owners, they're able to share experience, share lessons that they've learnt, and find solutions to this very difficult challenge, which is to transition our economy and decarbonise our economy. And so by collaborating with your peer group, that you are more able to find the solutions and create the progress that we actually need. So the collaboration is the collaboration is the number 17 of the SDGs, which we were talking about before, is a fundamental piece of our ability to solve these really difficult societal problems.
David, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures launched this week. Mm-hmm. Tell me, how are investors viewing nature risk and opportunity?
Yeah. So for many years, the focus has been on climate change by investors. But increasingly, there's a recognition that you can't solve the climate change issue unless you're also addressing the nature piece. We're depleting our natural resources in a way that means that is accelerating the climate change challenge. So over the last, I would say 18 months in particular, investors have been educating themselves about this issue and seeing what role they can play in ensuring that when they're identifying systemic risk, they're understanding where nature fits in. So the fact that we've now got the TNFD launched earlier this week is a really positive step, because that's now going to create the data from the companies around disclosures around nature that investors are going to be able to use to identify where they want to allocate their capital based on factoring in the nature data that our companies, in terms of their footprint in the natural environment. So it's I think it's a very next important step, and I think we'll see rapid adoption of TNFD. And on the back of TCFD, those two things together, I think, make a very compelling roadmap for investors to now follow.
And finally, David, this week is New York Climate Week. Tell me, what are some of your key takeaways?
So for me, a key takeaway is the need to continue to collaborate. There's been a lot of negativity we're not making enough progress, frustrations about the politicisation of sustainability, climate. What's been really pleasing to see, though, is that notwithstanding those frustrations, there's been really good initiatives that have been announced. The TNFD we just talked about, I think the fact that we saw the Federal Treasurer announce the US's response, those 9 principles addressing climate change, the net zero financing of it, is very positive. I think that we've seen some really positive steps around the SDG review process. The fact that in the UN General Secretary has continued to focus on these sustainability issues, being at the Leaders Forum yesterday at the UN and seeing what is good practice and what are some of the new innovations that governments around the world are actually doing was quite inspiring. But I think the thing for me that has probably the major theme is that the private sector can only play its part if we have the right enabling policy environment. And there's still more work to be done here. I heard many examples of innovation from companies and investors around climate change, around more broader sustainability issues. And often the thing that actually slowed things down or prevented them from scaling up was the wrong policy environment around them. So we've got to address these issues if we are going to get get us in a place where we have addressed climate change, we've addressed sustainability, and we've got a world that our members, from a pension fund perspective, can retire into with certainty and with comfort.
All right. Well, David, it's been wonderful to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on Floor Talk today.
My pleasure.